Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. 5 people were killed and more than 40 others were injured after an SUV plowed into a Christmas parade in Wisconsin. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney speaks out at the UCP's annual convention about why he made certain critical decisions during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the BC government introduced new gas and travel restrictions as many areas of the province are still reeling following massive flooding.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. 5 people are dead and more than 40 others were injured after an SUV plowed through a Christmas parade in suburban Milwaukee on Sunday. Officials say 18 victims were between the ages of 3 and 16 and were being treated in hospital.
The vehicle struck more than 20 individuals. Some of the individuals were children, and there were some fatalities as a result of this incident. We will not be releasing information on the fatalities at this time while we are working on notifying the family members of the deceased. An officer did discharge his weapon at the suspect vehicle to try to stop the vehicle. No bystanders were injured as a result of the weapon discharge. The officer involved has been with the department for 6.5 years. We're no longer looking for a suspect vehicle. We do have a person of interest in custody at the moment, but this is still a very fluid investigation.
And we're learning now that police have arrested a suspect in connection with the incident. He is 39-year-old rapper Daryl Edward Brooks, who also goes by the name Math Boy Fly. U.S. journalist Lisa Daftari says at this point, we don't know the motivation behind the attack.
It had been a few years since we had one of these car rammings during Christmas. We used to hear a lot about this during Christmas in Europe with extremists taking this opportunity as a very symbolic hit against Christianity, against Christmas, against Christians. And we saw a few of those episodes, but we haven't seen that for a while. And there is no confirmation yet that this is a hate crime or extremists, or we don't know the agenda yet or the motive.
Lisa will have more on the tragedy in Wisconsin coming up later in our broadcast. The United Conservative Party's annual general meeting wrapped up in Calgary over the weekend. Premier Jason Kenney acknowledged that he may not be the most popular premier right now. He defended actions taken to protect the province's healthcare system during the pandemic, despite the fact that some of those actions caused dissension within the ranks.
I know that many of you are angry with me and our government for having introduced public health restrictions at various times throughout COVID. I get it. I really do. I hear you, and I do so respectfully. It is no secret that these views have been strongly expressed in our caucus. But please hear me. If we had not made tough decisions, for example, in September, there is absolutely no doubt that we would have exceeded the total possible capacity of our hospitals to provide critical care. I was days away from having to authorize critical care triage protocols. Bluntly, that means pulling life support from some people and denying life-saving care to others.
Our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson, covered the convention in Calgary, and he joins me now via Zoom from Edmonton. Tyler, it appears as though the party is still somewhat divided as to whether to keep Premier Jason Kenney on as leader. Now, if Kenney was replaced, who would be strong enough to lead the party and take on Rachel Notley and the NDP?
Well, that was one of the things that you heard people talking about a little bit here and there over the course of the convention. Now, of course, Brian Jean was there for Friday night, and he's one of the people who's, not only said he wants Jason Kenney to resign, but he also wants to replace Jason Kenney. And then Danielle Smith also said over the weekend that if the position was vacant, she would maybe do it. Now, of course, both of them are sort of Wild Rose people, have legacies and histories in the province that could either help them, I suppose, to defeat the NDP or make it quite a bit more difficult.
Now, Tyler, while you were at the UCP annual general meeting, you say rivals actually shook hands, even appearing civil?
I was surprised by the level of civility over the weekend. I talked to a couple people beforehand and a couple people sort of at the start of the convention who expected a little bit of fireworks. There was expectations that maybe folks would walk out during Jason Kenney's big speech on Saturday. But yeah, the thing is that there's sort of like Brian Jean's people are former Wild Rose people, right? And there are former Wild Rose people who work for the UCP who were chatting and shaking hands, and you certainly I did not see at any rate, anyone shouting anything or being overly rude. It was a fairly cordial atmosphere all in all.
Now, was the leadership review discussed much? Will we have an early one in March? And any surprises for you at the UCP convention?
There is the possibility we'll see it. Whether or not those 22 constituency associations can force it is a little bit up in the air because it's a board decision and things like that. So that is still, sort of percolating to some extent, I would say. The only other thing that would really jump out at me, honestly, and it's kind of cliche, is that nothing really jumped out at me. It was in a lot of ways a very dull weekend. There wasn't a huge headline coming out of the weekend, which is exactly what Jason Kenney's people would have wanted. Certainly not the thing that his opponents would have wanted.
That was our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson, joining us from Edmonton. The Alberta NDP announced that former Lethbridge City Councillor Rob Miyashiro will be their candidate for Lethbridge East when the next provincial election rolls around in 2023. Miyashiro beat out 3 other candidates, including former MLA Maria Fitzpatrick. He says his platform will be focused on people, not things.
When you tell people that you're going to fight for people, not things, it resonates a bit differently. So when you say you want to create jobs, it's like anybody can say you can create jobs. But if you want to create specific parts of, enhance certain parts of the economy and certain kinds of jobs and bring in certain people and give people a sense of security and give people a sense of compassion that, you want to help people, you don't want to just help things. And I think that's definitely a way to go about it.
When the next provincial election rolls around in 2023, Miyashiro will be going up against the current MLA for the riding, the UCP's Nathan Newdorf. Well, it was a beautiful day in the city as we got over 10 degrees today. Jeanette Rocher is here with a quick peek of the weather forecast. Jeanette, it's great to enjoy the milder temperatures right now since we may actually see some snow on Tuesday.
Yeah, well, we actually hit higher than our expected high today. Expected high was 12 degrees, as you can see right there. We did hit around 13 degrees, so that was nice. Now, with our overnight lows heading down into the zeros and even the minuses, you're right, we are expecting to see some snow happening Tuesday evening. That'll happen late overnight. Don't worry, though, because those temperatures are climbing back into well above seasonal for this time of year. In fact, we could be seeing some double digits later on in the week. I will have those details coming up later in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The government of BC introduced new gas and travel restrictions to prioritize the movement of essential goods and services after severe storm damaged infrastructure. Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth announced the orders under the Emergency Program Act.
These orders will help keep commercial traffic moving, stabilize our supply chains, and make sure everyone gets home safely. Healthcare vehicles will continue to access fuel the way that they always do. Non-essential vehicles, including the general public, will still have access to gas available through retail gas stations. But people in southwestern British Columbia, Vancouver Island, and the Sunshine Coast will be limited to 30 liters per visit to the gas station. There will be temporary shortages, but we are taking this important step to maintain our supply of gasoline.
Now, as for trains in British Columbia, Canadian Pacific said it would reopen its railway between Kamloops and Vancouver by midday on Tuesday. The mayor of Abbotsford, BC, says the floodgates at the Barrowtown pump station have fully reopened, giving the city a little breathing room as it looks to lower water levels in the Sumas Prairie. But Henry Braun says the city is still a long way out of danger. He told a news conference that the damage to the region would have been much worse if the station had failed earlier in the week. A breach in the dike in the Sumas River has also been repaired, allowing water levels to drop.
It is our hope at this point that water levels will continue to decrease in the Sumas River so that the floodgates can remain open and potentially open fully. This is a good start and every little bit helps. Crews continue to make progress on repairing the Sumas Dike. Hundreds of dump trucks of gravel have made their way to the various breaches, and we believe that we are already greater than 50% done on the repairs to the larger breach between Marion, and Number 4 Road. We're also making progress at Cole Road and hope to complete this work before next week, before the next weather event.
The town of Princeton, British Columbia is reeling after a flood damaged much of their community. Many residents are emptying homes that are filled with mud and water.
First time I've experienced such a disaster. I survived the fire. Now this is a learning curve for me. I lost everything. Well, we lost everything, the wife and I don't know where to start. I don't know where it's going to end. And that's the main problem I'm facing right now. I saw a message on Facebook saying that there was 10 inches of water at the bottom of the street, and we didn't take much of it. We were sandbagging, and 2 guys came running down Lime saying the dike just got breached and to evacuate ASAP. And by the time I got the wife out of the house, 6 inches of water was coming into the house, and there was nothing I could do.
I think it's just all shock right now still. All the basements are just completely saturated and muddy. Water's still running in this yellow house right here. We're just trying to do the best we can. We've started Facebook groups to help at separate addresses. I've started a Facebook group with all the people that wanted to step up and help.
You're laughing, you're crying. It's the people who've come to help us, some people we don't even know. And the town motto, ironically, is where friends and rivers meet. I didn't realize that where the rivers meet is my basement, but the friends part is true.
Wow, simply incredible. Ottawa says BC residents displaced or left jobless due to extreme flooding should immediately apply for employment insurance benefits. The federal government is waiving the requirement for applicants to show a record of employment, recognizing it may be difficult to obtain proper paperwork right now. The Trudeau Liberals are also looking into the possibility that people may have exhausted their claims due to receiving pandemic benefits. Parliament was back in session on Monday. Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is calling for an emergency debate on the flooding in BC and how Ottawa can help with the infrastructure in the province to prevent future flooding.
We know that flooding is going to be more common, and we've seen it happen in communities across Canada. We've seen it here in Ottawa just a couple of years ago. So given that this type of extreme weather is more common, we need to see investments from the federal government, real proactive investments to make communities more resilient, more prepared for what is now becoming more common.
The devastation being felt in BC is also impacting our supply chain here in southwestern Alberta. That's according to Trevor Lewington with Economic Development Lethbridge.
Significantly for us, with both national railways suffering track damage and most of the major highways that connect the lower mainland to the rest of Canada cut off, we can definitely expect some impacts here. There's already been short-term supply chain disruptions. So the Port of Vancouver is the busiest port in Canada. So if you think about raw materials for our local manufacturers or finished goods for the store shelves this Christmas, that inbound freight is either stuck on the water or stuck in the port, and it might be many weeks, even months before that backlog is cleared.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Trevor Lewington and Jeanette Rocher coming up after Business News. Well, the winter season is fast approaching, and with that comes the harsh snow and colder temperatures. ALVIN Mills is the founder of the grassroots group called Kindness to Others. He's been working on the front lines helping our homeless for the past decade. Mills is a recovered addict, and he says he knows the importance winter clothing can have for our city's most vulnerable. He says he's looking for donations of heavy jackets and other winter clothing items that he can distribute to our homeless.
It could be like gloves, toques. I was able to get some socks and mitts, so anything helps as long as they're in good shape, and I'll make sure that they get used in the ones that need them. I've struggled at one time where the ones that I'm helping now, I was in their shoes at one time. So now it's just my way of helping, and of course I've been affected by the opioids through family and friends I've lost.
That is wonderful to see. And if you'd like to contact Mills directly to help with a donation, you can do so by giving him a call at 403-331-3768. The Southern Alberta Ethnic Association is offering up some Christmas cheer this holiday season. The group is putting on their 23rd annual complimentary community Christmas dinner. Now, it's for those in our community who are facing hardships. Last year, over 250 residents picked up a meal. The executive director of the association, Jackie French, says the need is even greater this year due to the pandemic. She says many families have suffered huge financial losses or even job loss during the past year. French says the association needs 15 turkeys and 12 hams to be able to complete their community Christmas dinner.
Even if people can drop off a turkey or a ham, that's great. If not, like some people will just come in and donate $50, $25, $100, whatever they can afford. Sometimes businesses will donate a little bit more, but everything helps and it adds up just so we can buy all the groceries. So we do a traditional full Christmas dinner. So we do turkeys, we do ham, we do potatoes, we do gravy, we do vegetables, buns, and a dessert.
The community Christmas dinner will be held December 12th from 3 till 5 p.m. and the food can be picked up at the Multicultural Centre in Lethbridge. Another Christmas van project has been put on by a local auto repair shop here in our city. The initiative is meant to help out families in Lethbridge who are in need during the holiday season. As Micah Quinn explains now, staff from the shop are excited to once again bring some added smiles to families who need it.
The Christmas Van project was started 7 years ago by Big Al's Auto Repair right here in Lethbridge. The initiative began after the owner and operator of the shop, Sean Hammond, had a friend of his parents encounter a family whose vehicle had broken down on the side of the highway. The shop was able to help the family, who had just moved to the area and were fleeing persecution.
They came here in search of a better life, but they came here with nothing. Like basically the clothes on their back and garbage bags full of clothes for them and their 3 kids. They bought a car at an auction, but the car was not in very good shape. So we got it here, we fixed it up as best as we could, but you know, we knew it wasn't gonna last long.
A staff member of Hammond's had the idea to gift a van to the family and give it to them as a Christmas gift.
We normally fill the vans with as much groceries as we can, gifts for the kids and for the family, gift cards for groceries or for gas, because that really helps get them through that first year. We also try and put enough cash together in Visa gift cards so that we can pay for their first year's insurance and registration so they don't have to worry about anything for the first year.
The company contacts local organizations that are working with families in the community, and they present the auto repair shop with ideas for those same families who could use some extra help.
Life isn't always easy. We've been there before, we've needed help, and there have been people there to help us, but not everybody has that. So we really want to be as part of the community that is giving back as much as the community is given to us.
This year's van will be given away sometime in the middle of December, and donations will be accepted until December 15th. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Some provinces are already starting to book appointments with the arrival of pediatric doses of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds. Manitoba parents began booking their shots for their kids earlier today. Ontario parents can begin making appointments for their 5 to 11-year-olds on Tuesday morning. Saskatchewan plans on vaccinating children on Wednesday at schools, libraries, and community centres. Now, this leads nicely into our poll question, which is, are you planning on having your child, age 5 to 11, vaccinated against COVID-19? Make sure you log on to our website, bridgecitynews.ca, and let us know your thoughts. Well, it was nice to feel the warmer temperatures across much of southwestern Alberta again, but that will be changing shortly, however. Complete weather details are on deck. We were well above our seasonal high for this time of year as we had double-digit temperatures once again in Lethbridge. So nice to see. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a full look at the forecast. Jeanette, it was mild today, but there is a slight chance of some snow in the forecast on Tuesday. Then it warms up again.
That's right, Hal. We could actually see some snow with those overnight lows now reaching into the minuses. We are looking at a potential of snow overnight on Tuesday. But like you said, we are going to be heading back into those above seasonal averages. Wednesday, we're looking at a high of 2 degrees with lots of sunshine before jumping into double digits for Thursday and Friday. Look at those temperatures, 16 the high on Thursday, 10 degrees for Friday before we hit 6 for Saturday and 9 degrees on Sunday. So for the most part, the majority of the week is sitting at the higher than the average high for this time of year of 2 degrees. -9 is the average low. So even with that in mind, we are still hitting temperatures a little bit warmer than that, which is surprising for this time of year. 18 degrees was our high back in 1954. -30 is where we were at back in 1985. 7:54 is when the sun rose this morning, and our sun set this afternoon, 4:41 p.m. So just around 8 hours and 47 minutes of daylight. Over on the west coast, we're looking at sunshine tomorrow in Victoria, 10 degrees the high. Vancouver looking at rains overnight tonight, but clearing up tomorrow, 9 degrees the high, -3 tomorrow in Edmonton. Calgary could be seeing a 30% chance of flurries tomorrow with a high of -1. Those are the flurries that are going to be hitting Lethbridge Tuesday evening. So 0 degrees the high in Saskatoon tomorrow, mix of sun and cloud. Regina's looking at 3 degrees for Tuesday, lots of sunshine. Sunshine also in the forecast for Winnipeg on Tuesday with a high of 0 degrees. They're looking at wind gusts of 30 to 50 kilometers per hour. A lot of those prairie cities also seeing some wind chill factors as well. 3 degrees the high in Toronto tomorrow, -4 in Ottawa, -2 the temperature tomorrow in Montreal with a mix of sun and cloud. Now, as we look to the east coast, this is where we're seeing more precipitation happening. Fredericton's high 1 degree, 7 degrees the high in Halifax. Looking at rainfall warning in effect for this evening, should be clearing up by tomorrow afternoon, looking at 10 to 15 millimeters, 15 to 25 millimeters of rain tomorrow, mixed with snow in Charlottetown, and a high of 5 tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland, with a mix of sun and cloud and wind gusts up to 60 km. So there you go. That is your forecast.
The province announced a memorandum of understanding with Japan to expand market access for Alberta's energy sector. Officials say this will help to improve cooperation between the two countries on environmental technologies like hydrogen, ammonia, carbon capture, utilization, and storage. The agreement will also focus on getting more of our energy products to Tidewater. The province's bilateral trade between Alberta and Japan was around $2.2 billion in 2020. Last year, Alberta's exports to Japan totaled around $2 billion, including exports of energy, agriculture, and forestry. Ottawa is suspending all shipments of fresh PEI potatoes to the United States. It's a decision that the province's potato authority is calling politically motivated. Federal Agriculture Minister Marie-Claude Bebeau says her department had no choice following the recent discovery of a fungus on 2 island potato farms. She says Washington would have imposed a ban if Canada did not act first. PEI's potato board warns the decision will lead to the destruction of hundreds of millions of pounds of good potatoes. Rogers says its proposed $26 billion takeover of Shaw Communications is going to enhance competition. It did not, however, make guarantees at a CRTC hearing into the merger that Shaw customers won't see their bills go up. The two companies' CEOs told the regulator that the deal is necessary in order for Canadian firms to compete in the increasingly globalized market for content and rising expectations on digital offerings. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 134 points on the day to 21,421. The Dow was up 17 points to 35,619. The S&P 500 was down 15 points on the day to 4683, and the Nasdaq was down 202 points to 15,855. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 81 cents to 76.75 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 28 cents to 4.79 US. Gold was up 5 cents to 18.0470 US an ounce, and silver was even at 24.18 US an ounce. Wheat is at $12.76 per bushel, barley's at $9.77, canola's at $23.15, and corn is at $10.80 per bushel. Live cattle were up 90 cents to $134.43, feeder cattle were up 78 cents to $161.70, and lean hogs were up 90 cents to $74.65. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 78.73 US. Recapping one of our top stories, BC brought forth new gas restrictions in dealing with the aftermath of nasty storms which has devastated the province. Officials say drivers of non-essential vehicles in southwestern BC, Vancouver Island, and the Sunshine Coast can only have access to gas, but around 30 litres per visit. BC Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth says the drastic step was necessary to help the province maintain its supply of gasoline. A small town located around 25 kilometers outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, is reeling after an SUV plowed into a Christmas parade, killing 5 and injuring more than 40. American correspondent Lisa Daftari will have more details for us next. At least 5 people were killed and another 40 were injured when a vehicle sped into a Christmas parade in Wisconsin on Sunday. To discuss this in more detail is U.S. correspondent Lisa Daftari joining us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, please say a red SUV drove directly into the WAUKESHA Christmas parade located about 17 miles or just over 25K west of Milwaukee. What do we know at this point?
You know, the suspect has been taken into custody this morning. We don't know much. We have just, the storyline is horrific, right? It had been a few years since we had one of these car rammings during Christmas. We used to hear a lot about this during Christmas in Europe with extremists taking this opportunity as a very symbolic hit against Christianity, against Christmas, against Christians. And we saw a few of those episodes, but we haven't seen that for a while. And there is no confirmation yet that this is a hate crime or extremists, or we don't know the agenda yet or the motive. What we do know is that a 39-year-old was taken into custody and that there were 5 fatalities and over 40 people that were injured. This is horrific. People have their guards down. It's the holiday season, the beginning of the holiday season, where people are just, happy. We've had a pandemic for 2 years. People have not been able to go out and enjoy the holidays that, the way that we usually do. And for this to happen in a small town, again, with people having their guards down, being vulnerable and trying to just enjoy the holiday season, this is very, very horrific. Obviously, this is a very fluid story, so it will continue to develop and we'll know more about the suspect and the motive in the hours to come.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye on this story. Lisa, the Attorney General for Texas, Ken Paxton, reacted to yet another migrant caravan headed for the U.S. border. Now, reports say local governments are unable to keep track of illegal immigrants who are crossing the border from a number of Central and South American countries.
Yeah, the sheer number is just too many. People are having, the border towns, I should say, and the border states are the ones who are expressing concern here because they cannot control the masses, the sheer number. And of course, the administration is sending out mixed messaging, right? So first they say don't come, then they want to try to control or curb the number of migrants coming in, and then it's just free for all. They're saying come on in. And remember again, Hal, we cannot vet these individuals. There's no way to call, the local DMV in Honduras or Guatemala and ask about these individuals and who they were and whether they have a record or not. So we do have an issue of drugs coming in over the border. We have had a high of the number of overdoses in this country for the past couple of years. And it's not a coincidence, right? These are very, very, very addictive opioids that are coming in over the border. We have a problem with COVID, obviously. We cannot vet these individuals. Again, we're dealing in a time where people can't enter a restaurant without showing their vaccine passport. Here in Los Angeles, it's become that way. You can't enter a gym or a club or anything without showing your vaccine passport, and yet you have hundreds and thousands of individuals coming over. Obviously, the crowds are not 6 feet apart. They're not social distancing. They're not being obviously as careful as they can be because their only goal is to get over the border and to get into the United States. And I will add, we have this story on the Foreign Desk last week. This is from John Solomon of Just the News. This was a breaking story that showed the brochure that these migrants were getting when they're coming over the border. The kind of treatment that they're getting is like being on a celebrity cruise line. They get a pamphlet, they get instructions on how to evade the law, they get a free one-way ticket to the city of their choice. So they come in over the border and they say, well, I want to be in Beverly Hills. Well, they will get a ticket to Beverly Hills. They also get free stays at nice hotels like the Hyatt and the Marriott. And these are nonprofit organizations, American-based 501c3s that are funding these projects. So again, we are battling, this force that wants these individuals to come in over the border, not acknowledging the danger that it poses to all Americans. We'd all love to be gracious and lax about this, but the bottom line is that these facts exist, these dangers exist, and we shouldn't be looking the other way. So when states like Texas, New Mexico, and others are expressing concern, we ought to listen.
Vetting is key. You're absolutely right. Not only for people who've maybe had their COVID shots coming across the border, and by the way, we're using vaccine passports here in Alberta as well, in Canada, but how about potential, I don't know, there might be a potential terrorist in the group as well who's not vetted properly, posing as a refugee coming across the border as an immigrant, as a migrant.
We've seen that. Yeah, absolutely, Al. We've seen that. And it's so difficult, needle in a haystack. It's so difficult to pinpoint these individuals because there is no vetting going on, right? And there's obviously no profiling going on. There's no vetting going on. There's no questioning. I mean, again, the sheer numbers are so difficult to absorb. So we're definitely not doing so in a mindful or, a careful way to see who these individuals are, what their backgrounds are, who they are. And the ones who are embedding themselves, as you said, they're professionals, right? So they would know exactly how to act and how to present themselves to get in over the border, perhaps even get a nice paycheck, right? We know that idea has been tossed around here at the White House, where these individuals might get up to $450,000 coming in over the border. It's horrific. The whole concept is so dangerous to society here, and in so many ways. But we have seen examples, as you said, how of dangerous elements coming in over the border and taking advantage of the fact that we're open and we're allowing these unvetted individuals to come over the border.
There's some serious tension developing between the United States and Israel right now. Lisa, there are some major differences between the two nations regarding nuclear talks with Iran. Now, these differences were aired recently during an international conference in Bahrain. Tell me more about that.
Right. How embarrassing, right? So the bottom line, we're trying to get into an Iran nuclear deal in order to curb a regime that has poured billions of dollars into terrorism, into Hezbollah, into Hamas, into Al-Qaeda's pockets. And therefore, why should any two democratic countries like Israel and the United States that have been allied for so many years be on different pages regarding how to curb a terrorist influence? We should follow Israel's lead on this, right? They're the ones who are in the neighborhood. They understand the threat of the Iranian regime. They're in direct way of their missiles, and of course, the Iranian regime has sworn to take Israel off the map. So, if I were in the White House, I'd say, let us know what the threats are, because you've kept an eye on the Iranian threat. But right now we have a different president administration in office who believes that appeasing a terrorist regime like the Iranian regime is number one. And that hasn't gotten us anywhere, right? So far, they've tried to get back into the Iran nuclear deal. That was the Obama era nuclear deal. And Iran has become increasingly bold to say, we're not going to change a thing. We're not going to back down from our missile program. We're not going to back down from uranium enrichment. We're not going to back down from the funding of terror. And obviously, Israel's not on board with having no conditions or minimal conditions. They're not on board with removing the sanctions before we see any behavioral change from the Iranian regime. And of course, this sounds like common sense to you and I, but to the White House, it sounds like it might kind of, upset the deal. So we don't want that, right? That's why we'll see where this is going to go. Of course, we have November 29th in the books as the day in which we're going to go back to the negotiating table with the world powers, the United States and the Iranian regime, to see if they can carve out another Iran nuclear deal. Listen, the United States is roaring to go. They want this deal, and the Iranian regime knows that. That's not a good place to start your leveraging, but let's see how it goes.
Lisa, clashes broke out between Israeli security forces and Palestinians over the weekend as hundreds marched to honor a Hamas terrorist who allegedly killed an Israeli and wounded 4 others in Jerusalem's Old City.
Yeah, horrific story. Unfortunately, I'd have to say it's nothing new. This was in the Old City, in the tunnels that lead up to the Western Wall. If you've been to Jerusalem, this is where every tourist walks, right? So I've been there dozens of times, and I know these tunnels very well, and I know these are like shops, old shops that people go to buy souvenirs and such. And the young man who's 25 years old and was killed recently moved to Israel from South Africa in order to live there and have a wonderful, rich experience. So he became a tour guide in the Old City and unfortunately was killed by a Hamas terrorist. Now, the headlines say that they're marching the Palestinians were marching in eastern Jerusalem, but what you're not reading is how they're passing around candy and sweets to celebrate the death. This is what the Western media does not understand. This is what so many people don't understand, is the mentality, the ideology of when someone is killed, an innocent young child that is 25 years old, has the rest of his life ahead of him, is killed, then they're passing around sweets. They're not mourning him. They're looking at the guy who killed him as a martyr. They're celebrating the death of another human being. And this is, this is the truth. And this is the daily ins and outs of living in Israel, living in Jerusalem. The same day, there was a stabbing in Jaffa port, which is, again, another tourist area. These are innocent individuals. These are not soldiers. They're not equipped with weaponry. These are innocent people that are living their normal lives and are killed because of an ideology that says you must kill Jews. And they know it as a good deed. They know it as martyrdom to kill Jews. And this is a terror organization. We can circle back to the Iran story. The Iran regime is funding Hamas and these types of terrorist activities. They're pay to slay. They're paying the families of those who are willing to blow themselves up or die killing another a Jew. So this is the reality of the situation. And I just want to paint the macro of it. The micro of it is, unfortunately, another young person was killed, but the macro of it is this ideology is not going anywhere. And this is the daily reality for people who live in that region.
Yeah, very, very sad indeed. Lisa, U.S. intelligence agencies found evidence that construction work has begun on a secret Chinese military facility in the United Arab Emirates. What does that mean for us here in the West? Should we be concerned?
It means wake up. Yes, it means wake up. Exactly right. We should be concerned. Every day, we're at the Foreign Desk, we're putting up a different report that says the Pentagon said, this think tank said, all these different generals and admirals have said, meaning there is now this waking up to the fact that the Chinese are surpassing us in the Navy, in the military, on cyber capabilities, and they are spreading their influence globally in the African continent, in the South American continent, and here you see in the Middle East as well. They'll be there in Afghanistan to pick up the pieces. They'll be there in Iraq and Syria and Libya, and now obviously in the U.A.E., a very rich country that has begun doing business with Israel, and of course, vis-a-vis Israel, the United States has increased their cooperation with the U.A.E. And what do we notice there? Well, the Chinese are also beefing up their assets there. And the U.S. intervened and they stopped construction at a port in Khalifa. Very, very, very important symbolic catch that the United States had. But again, the message here is wake up. We have to catch on to the Chinese, their agenda, not just in the Red Sea and in their area, but in spreading their influence globally as well.
There are reports that Iran's Revolutionary Guard seized a foreign ship in Gulf waters, Lisa, a ship they say is loaded with smuggled diesel. Now, has the ship been identified? And what do we know of the nationalities of the 11 crew who have been detained?
Yeah, this is a very, very interesting story because we see that a lot of these proxy wars that were going on in places like Libya or Syria, Iraq, for example, that were being funded by, let's say, Saudi Arabia versus Iran, or the Iranian regime fighting even the United States, are now going on in maritime efforts or capabilities. So we're seeing a lot of what's going on is the seizing of ships. You're hearing a lot of these stories where the Iranian regime is keeping an eye on the waters in order to seize, and the same thing's going on in the West. We're trying to seize the ships that are coming out this way. This time it was a ship that was carrying diesel fuel, and we'll have to keep an eye on what the details are that comes out of this story.
So I guess we don't know who they are, I guess the nationalities, or much about the ship at this point, right?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Keeping an eye on that.
Now, Lisa, 2 of the 17 North American hostages abducted by a Haitian gang in mid-October have been freed. Now, that's according to the church they were affiliated with. Apparently, they're safe and in good spirits, which is great news. Why the release, and what about the remaining hostages?
Yes. So this is a very interesting story. We've taken our eyes off of Haiti. The Haitian crisis was after the president was killed, and many, many gangs were taking over the area. This was a Christian group that was visiting, trying to spread, good feelings, good sentiments, and they were abducted by one of these gangs. 2 of these individuals were let go, according to the church, and they're doing well. They're in good spirits. They were treated, as well as can be for being abducted. And they say that the rest of the group is doing well also. We're hoping that the rest of the group gets off as well. This usually happens when gangs want to kind of show good behavior in order to get some sort of concession from someone or something from someone. So it might have been a local deal that was made, some sort of compromise that was made, and two were let go in good faith or in a symbolic exchange, and the rest hopefully will be let go very soon. But thank you for keeping an eye on this and covering it in your show, because I don't think many people are focusing on this story. We've forgotten about the 17, but again, they were there for a good reason, and we hope that their good deeds can pave the way to their full release.
Do we know what the demands are at this point? How much of a ransom are they asking for, the kidnappers?
No, not specifically, but this group actually does have a history of abducting individuals similar to this group and of demanding either ransom or something from the local community. But right now, gangs have the upper hand in Haiti. There is a lot of anarchy going on. There is really an interim government that does not have much power, and the gangs are really ruling the streets.
Another story to definitely keep our eyes on. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftori, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Thanks so much, Lisa.
My pleasure.
How is the Lethbridge economy doing on the heels of the fourth wave of COVID? Well, joining me to discuss the Southern Alberta economic situation is Trevor Lewington, the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. Trevor, welcome back. So great to have you on again.
Thanks so much for having me back. Appreciate it.
Of course. So Trevor, first of all, with the devastating flood situation that has hit British Columbia so hard, this apparently will affect the supply chain significantly. So what effect will this have on businesses here in Southern Alberta?
Yeah, great question. First and foremost, there's been catastrophic damage to homes, entire communities, and infrastructure across a really wide swath of BC. I mean, lives have been lost, livelihoods disrupted. So I know I speak for all Albertans when we say our hearts and thoughts are certainly with our neighbors in British Columbia. But, siggnificantly for us, with both national railways suffering track damage and most of the major highways that connect the lower mainland to the rest of Canada cut off, we can definitely expect some impacts here. There's already been short-term supply chain disruptions. So the Port of Vancouver is the busiest port in Canada. So if you think about raw materials for our local manufacturers or finished goods for the store shelves this Christmas, that inbound freight is either stuck on the water or stuck in the port, and it might be many weeks, even months before that backlog is cleared. So I do think you'll see some reduced selection on store shelves this coming season, and some outages, some other items. And for our producers and manufacturers, of course, they're trying to get their products and services out of Alberta to global markets. And our region, Lethbridge in particular, has seen a steady growth in exports over the last couple of years. And so, we've got this interesting situation where we've got a booming business, an opportunity to export, and no infrastructure to get there. So challenges ahead, but transportation companies are resilient. They're often finding other pathways, and whether it's redirecting through the US or finding another mode of transportation, companies will figure out. It's just a question of delays and more costs. So definitely an impact for us here in Lethbridge.
Yeah, now, thank you so much for mentioning how our hearts are with British Columbia, our neighbors. Of course, it's just so devastating what's happened over there. And it is really interesting to see just that kind of chain of events here. So I'm just wondering now, Trevor, because you mentioned Christmas time, not as many things on the shelves maybe. What are you hearing from local business owners regarding the Christmas season? Are they worried about this? Is it looking like consumers are going to buy locally as well, or not so much maybe?
Yeah, great question. I think there's certainly some expectation and some excitement about the Christmas season. It's typically the busiest part of the retail year. It's when most retailers do, 50 to 60% of their business on average. So the bulk of the year for most retail businesses is during the Christmas season. So it's very, very important. We've seen during the pandemic, community groups like the Chamber of Commerce and others talk about the importance of buying local. Certainly, there's been lots of activity on social media, different awareness campaigns to educate people. And I think genuinely people want to support local. They see the importance of that. And we estimate for that every $1 that's spent in the local economy, it has a multiplier effect of about $7. So every $1 you spend in a locally owned business creates $7 more in our economy. Really important for people to focus on that. The risk, of course, are some of the issues. I think we're going to continue to see the impact of digital shopping, that online shopping, where if you're hesitant to go outside or you're worried about mask mandates, perhaps you'll rely on a delivery service of some sort. And again, those supply chain disruptions, I think we will see some shortages and some cancellations of orders. And so that will have an impact on what's available on the shelf. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds.
Yeah, it sure will be, for sure. Now, the fourth wave of COVID seems to be flattening out now. So do we have any numbers on how many Lethbridge businesses have been affected by the latest wave?
Yeah, I mean, I think every business has been impacted in some way, whether it's enforcing, masking or implementing the restrictions exemption program. The pandemic has definitely created all kinds of new procedures and considerations for the business community. And I think we're all still learning about what the best way to protect ourselves is as new information is released. Hospitality and tourism has certainly been less impacted this time compared to previous waves. Restaurants, bars, entertainment venues have been able to operate more or less at full capacity when they have vaccination checks and other processes in place. So that's helped reduce the impact there. We have seen some businesses have to, be creative, just as they were during the pandemic, with other options for consumers that are concerned about COVID, whether it's curbside pickup or delivery or some of those other things. Travel has picked up. We've certainly seen borders reopen of late, which is encouraging. Airlines are adding capacity. In-person meetings and conferences, I've been to a few lately. So I think that's helped that particular sector. In terms of the numbers locally, we haven't really seen a change in the number of active businesses. There's really been no decrease or closures that we've noticed. Same number of licenses issued, generally speaking. Haven't seen a major change in either personal or business bankruptcies. So that's the good news. I think, the government supports that were put in place have had a positive impact, maybe delayed some of the pain to come in the coming months. But certainly we haven't seen any major impacts on the local business community, from a pure metrics perspective.
Mm-hmm. What are you hearing from local businesses regarding the vaccine mandates? Are they seeing a decline or an increase in business with this policy in place?
Yeah, again, I think it depends a little bit on what kind of business you are. So restaurants, bars, and entertainment venues, if you think about movie theaters or even Hurricanes hockey at the NMAX, all of those facilities and businesses are grateful, I think, to have the vaccine mandate. It's allowed them to operate at either full or near full capacity versus some of the shutdowns we had in earlier phases of the pandemic. So that's a good news. I have heard from some retailers and some business owners that they have noticed a decline in traffic. Certainly there are still people that are a little hesitant perhaps to be in large crowds or perhaps be out during the busy Christmas season. So, we'll have to monitor that. But I think overall businesses are pleased with the program and are pleased that they can operate at either near or full capacity.
Mm-hmm. And how are businesses faring, finding workers to fill job vacancies, especially in the areas of retail and restaurants, like you were mentioning?
Yeah, that is the single largest piece of feedback we get from the business community, the challenge of finding, both attracting and retaining skilled workforce. In the Lethbridge Medicine Hat region today, there are approximately 4,600 job vacancies. So those are 4,600 jobs in our region that employers are looking to fill, and there simply aren't people that are able to be hired or that are applying. So that's the big concern. Again, I think as government support programs have wound down in the last month, we may see more people re-enter the workforce as their financial situation changes and those government programs are no longer there. Many employers are getting more creative, offering incentives and signing bonuses and other perks to attract people. But there fundamentally has been a bit of a reset. There's been some popular media conversation around this concept of quote unquote the Great Resignation. The pandemic has forced us to work from home and perhaps rethink how we work. And so we are seeing people make career changes, perhaps relocating communities, giving serious consideration to what they want out of their career. And I think that's going to have long-term implications for all jobs and all employers.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you heard how other communities in southern Alberta are doing regarding all of this as well? Are they doing better or worse than Lethbridge regarding vaccine mandates, trying to fill vacancies left open from the pandemic? What have you? What have you hearing?
Yeah, there's some good news. It's a bit of a mixed bag. So if you think about oil and gas economies, whether that's more of a significant factor like Tabor or Medicine Hat as an example, the increases in prices for oil and natural gas have driven more activity. So those communities have certainly seen an upward swing in employment coming from those sectors. On the downside in the region, our agricultural industries, many of our producers and growers were negatively impacted by the drought over the summer. Yields were down. Early harvest resulted in less crops, which is unfortunate because commodity prices were at an all-time high for the most part. So we have seen some of our rural communities negatively impacted by the after effects of drought and the weather. And at the same time, there are still sort of shoots of optimism, I would say. Renewable energy projects, there's a great deal of investment in both solar and wind projects in the region. That's an opportunity for some of our more rural communities to chip in. So again, bit of a mixed bag. There are some wins, there are some challenges, and definitely some bumps ahead on the horizon.
Yeah, for sure. It'd be interesting to see how that pans out. Now, Trevor, what is your reaction to the upcoming amendments of the Business Corporations Act that the UCP government is proposing? So the UCP claims that the changes will make the province a more competitive and attractive place to do business. But what are your thoughts? Have you had a chance to read the amendments?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Corporate governance doesn't normally excite most people. It's not a topic we see in popular media most of the time. But if you think about the recent story where the Rogers Empire, a family-controlled corporation, big boardroom fight, control of this multi-billion-dollar important national company came down to control and how control was exercised based on BC laws where that company is incorporated. So the Business Corporations Act is not the most exciting read, but certainly it's an important document. It is important for companies in terms of how they're set up, how their boards function. So the UCP government has introduced changes that will modernize that piece of legislation. Some of that is very good news, allowing for digital meetings, allowing for non-written resolutions, which is just a reflection of the modern era and the fact that most things happen in an electronic way, which was not reflected in the legislation. But there are a number of other structural changes that potentially, the way they're being positioned by the government, will be able to attract more corporate investment to Alberta. And so that's the hope, is that by creating more flexibility and structure, by leveraging some of these other tools that are not really available in Canada for corporations, that this will incent some new investment in our province. So again, more to be debated. I think that the bill will make its way through the legislature and sort of the debating process. But I'm interested to see sort of the reaction from the business community and whether they view these changes positively or not.
Switching gears here, so Lethbridge has a new mayor and council. So what are you hearing from business owners? Are they confident in the new leadership team?
Well, every election is an opportunity for change and for renewal. So I think that's the exciting time is we have a new council getting down to work. Certainly many of those new and even some of the returning councillors campaigned on platforms that talked about supporting the business community, creating jobs, the importance of economic development. So right now, council's really only been in place for about 3 weeks since their organizational meeting. They've gone through orientation training. They're going through some learning sessions with all of the different city departments and functions. And the next major piece of work for them is their strategic plan. So they're going to build a document that really sets the tone for the next 4 years. And so when that comes out, I think we'll have a real good sense of what this council stands for and what their priorities are. Certainly, we'll be advocating for a focus on economic development, creating jobs, supporting the business community. And I look forward to working with this new council and kind of hearing their ideas on what those priorities are.
Yeah, it should be exciting for sure. Now, have you heard any news of potential increases in new business ventures in our area?
Well, my team here at Economic Development Lethbridge has been very busy. We're back to pre-pandemic levels of inquiries and activity, so that's great news. Lethbridge is certainly very interesting to a number of international companies. They're interested in the agri-food sectors in particular. We have a strong tech sector here, and of course, some very creative manufacturing companies. So I would say there's definitely momentum and renewed interest in our area. And that's a tribute to our 2 world-class post-secondary institutions, the fact that we have great road access. We're right on the Canamex corridor, north and south. We've got Highway 3 east-west, of course, great rail connections, and of course, recent improvements at the airport. So Lethbridge has all the right ingredients, and we are definitely seeing that increase in interest and inquiries for this region, for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, you'd mentioned before how many job vacancies there are left from the pandemic. But Trevor, do you know what the unemployment rate is right now for the Lethbridge Medicine Hat region?
Yeah, so the Lethbridge Medicine Hat economic region actually has the lowest unemployment rate in the province. We're currently sitting at 5.3%. And for Lethbridge specifically, so when we look at the city of Lethbridge or the census metropolitan area, our unemployment rate is actually 5.2%, and that's the 9th lowest for any census metropolitan area in the country. So we're in pretty good shape. The other major measure that we track is participation rate. And so that's a measure of the number of people in the workforce. And that was actually down last month, which is the first time it's decreased since June. And so when you look at that, the size of our workforce has shrunk a little bit. And last month we did lose 1,200 jobs. So that's a bit of a concern. Even though we're in good shape and we do have the lowest unemployment rate in the province, we'll continue to keep an eye on that because we want to make sure that people aren't exiting the workforce and that we don't continue to see those job losses.
Yeah, for sure. Now, what are your thoughts on where Lethbridge, the Lethbridge economy is headed over the next 6 months?
Yeah, I'm fundamentally optimistic. I really do think we have one of the most diversified economies in the province. We have that depth of talent because of those two, world-class post-secondary institutions. We've got a wealth of natural resources when it comes to renewable energy, which more and more is a focus around the world for environmental, social, and governance factors, or so-called ESG for corporate governance. Our manufacturers locally have shown growth over the last 2 years in their exports, and that's in the face of a global slowdown and the pandemic. We've still increased exports from our region. I'm a little bit concerned about the risk of inflation. We have seen the largest cost of living increases in the last 2 decades over the last couple of months. Food costs, energy costs are certainly on the way up, and that isn't expected to moderate until the back half of next year. So people definitely need to be prepared to pay more in the months to come, and that could slow economic activity a little bit. Additionally, the Bank of Canada has been pretty transparent about their intention to raise interest rates again sometime in the back half of next year. So that will increase the costs of borrowing on things like mortgages and loans. So there are definitely some challenges ahead, and certainly unknown factors if there's a further wave of COVID that impacts our hospitality and entertainment sectors. But for Lethbridge specifically, our region, the fundamentals are very solid. We're in a very good position, and we are still one of the top performing areas in the province. So I remain incredibly optimistic about our prospects.
Thanks so much for being with us today, Trevor. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks again for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Trevor Lewington is the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.